everyone. Welcome to the the Transatlantic Calling Show. I got the name wrong then. It's because I was just writing an angry tweet to get people to call in. Welcome to the Transatlantic Calling Show, the show where you can call in and talk to some real trans people and tell us why today is the last day of trans rights and it's over. It's done. This is what people are telling me on Twitter. Trans rights is finished. Trans people are over, completely finished. Call in and explain why that's true and why we are still on the air. This week, you could talk to me, Katy Montgomerie, and for the first time in a while, at least as far as I know,
Josie Caballero. How are you, everybody? We had a good run, you know. Trans rights, we had a pretty good run. We got pretty far, and now it's just done.
Yeah. Ever since like Obama invented us in 2018 or whenever, we've done a little, quite a lot in such a short space of time.
Yeah, but now
we've been around for like 6 months or something. Yeah, it's over. But Josie, I haven't seen you in ages. How are you doing? We've only had like 30 seconds to catch up before the show. How are you?
I know. I literally coming off of the Centerlink East Summit that was happening. So that was a good time. I'm doing great. I'm now, professionally always doing wonderful things. I spoke to Congress like literally 2 days ago. I'm doing it again in a couple weeks. Like, I know. I'm now like a president of the Transgender American Veteran Association. Thrust upon me, and so now I'm just busy like always, but I am, and this is exciting, I'm gonna be more frequent here with you and the Transatlantic Calling Show, which is super exciting. See, I love this community so much that I'm actually making time to be here all the time.
That is quite a sacrifice. It's certainly a sacrifice for me when I realized Thursday, like 20 minutes before the show goes on. I'm like, oh shit. I was like in a forest at like 5 minutes before the show was meant to start last week. So that's why we had to delay it because I forgot. Totally my fault. But yeah, it's exciting that you're going to be around more. And it's exciting we're going to do more of this show, even after the demise of trans rights.
Yeah, exactly. We will still march on regardless, like it or not, into the ocean if have to.
I don't feel like the transphobes really have an end game plan that they've really thought of. But we will come to more of what's going on when we get to the polls, which we'll come to very shortly. But first, I'd just like to remind everyone, this is actually a call-in show. This isn't just me and Josie catching up live on air. You can call in for free if you click on the link in the description, or if you're in the US, you can call in on the number +1 720 619 2288, and you can talk to us. We will take your call if you are gender critical or transphobic or no, I'm not anti-trans. I just think we need to protect the children. We will take your calls first. You will be highlighted. So please do call in. But we also take other calls. We take nice people. This week, because we've started late, I'm not going to be able to stay around as long. Josie, I don't know how much energy you have or whether you want to do the second half of the show on your own or whether we're just going to do a few calls
fine.
this week.
I'm okay, down well,
we'll take
whatever.
a few calls. We'll take a few calls and we'll see how it goes. But also at the end of the show, if you send in a super chat of $5 or more, we will read it out, or maybe just Josie will read it out, depending on how late it is.
Yeah.
And that would be a fun time. And you can send in all of your compliments about not our appearances, because we don't take appearances compliments on this show, but about our brains, we will take those compliments. So please do send them in if you like. But anyway, let's look at the polls this week. So last week we asked a poll question to our audience, and it was, does oversimplifying definitions to cater to cisgender understanding negatively impact trans rights discourse? And this was a proper Brexit numbers. 52 said yes, 48% said no. Josie, what do you think? How do you interpret this question, and how would you have voted?
Ooh, this is interesting because I am also split, because it's one of those things, like, if we oversimplify definitions, it means, like, what are we saying by oversimplify? Because when you're talking about like messaging to people in the middle, like people who are kind of like don't understand, like, for example, gender affirming care, right? Sometimes it's better to say transition related care because then the people know exactly what we're talking about, and they're like, oh yeah, we shouldn't try to remove that. While some people think of like gender affirming care, what is that, what does that even mean? I thought gender was a social construct, right? So like sometimes when you just say things like transition related healthcare, doctor prescribed healthcare, like, you know, trans people deserve rights and things like that, I think it doesn't hurt us, right? I think it actually, there's actually positive to it, right? Like you got to think about like in the marriage equality movement, love is love. How simple is that? Right? Like, you know, so sometimes just going oversimplified in that way can also create great messaging. So yeah,
Absolutely, yeah.
I would have probably said no after just saying talking about all
Yeah,
that just
I
now.
think I think that's kind of the main thing. Or I guess we were also split last week when we were discussing it, and how it's good to communicate things directly. I know that people like to come up with nice terms for things, like love is a good one because it, or you know, um, what's the other one that's along those lines? Love wins, like that kind of
Yeah.
thing. You know what it means. It's quite simple. It communicates it, but it doesn't like explain all the complexities. And there's room for like when people take that as like as if it's an argument in a philosophical paper. They're like, love is love. That's a tautology. Actually, that doesn't make it. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, it's not an argument. It's a good slogan, and it is important to have good slogans to win over like people's initial interest, so they can understand what's going on. And I like that communicating that way. And it kind of frustrates me when people try and come up with these kind of euphemisms that hide what's going on, because I know people want something nice sounding, because love is love also sounds nice, because you could also say like any adults fucking is good. Maybe it's not like
Yeah.
so like, you know, but like fucking is so crude that people might get turned off with. But like being blunt, like you should be allowed to fuck any consenting person who will have you. Like that should be
Right.
adult. That is
Adult,
like
yeah.
a good way of communicating it still. um but it's with like trans healthcare. I always say trans healthcare because I think it's the most obvious, simple thing. It's healthcare for trans people. Like, you know what we're talking
Mhm.
about. Whereas when people start saying gender affirming healthcare, I'm like, is it really affirming gender? That's kind of a garbage phrase, I personally think. And then also some people are like, well, actually, breast augmentation and hair transplants for cis men are gender affirming healthcare. So really, cis people, and then it's like, well, now it's kind of, that's not what I'm talking
And
about. I'm saying
and
trans people
now
should have access to healthcare.
and now I'm thinking about, like, what is a woman? Like, you know, the idea of, like,
Yeah,
women's an
yeah,
adult human female. Like, you know, it's just like, and so again, it goes back into the messaging, right? It's like, I guess in both realms, it depends on who is speaking it into existence can also play. And I think that's why we get a 50-50 split, because I think you can also look at it in that way too. Is like, oh, we're going to oversimplify the definition of woman, which can't be oversimplified, right? Like, like
I think,
you know, it's complex on purpose. It
yeah,
is. That's
we,
what it
we
is.
kind of missed out on that, because what is a woman should have been what we say, because the other side of being
Yeah,
like, what a woman is obvious. Everyone knows. You're like, okay, what is a woman then? Explain it to me. And then they come up with some stupid
yeah,
definition. You're like, here's a counterexample. That's circular. That doesn't make any sense. And then they flounder. Whereas when they
yeah,
say, what is a woman, the implication is that they know and they're asking you, but they don't know. Uh,
exactly.
and so really, we should have got in there first with that one. But
We should have got there
um,
first. Yeah, that we missed out on that. You can blame
I
us,
think,
Katie and
yeah,
Josie.
I think on the other side, sometimes oversimplifying can be obviously detrimental, where people get the idea that some things are really simple and that they're then not an issue. But I don't know. Generally, simplified messaging is important. Like I find that people really struggle with just communicating things simply. Sometimes people message me on Twitter and they're like, I really want to tell people about this thing that's happening. And I'm like, okay, what's happening? And then they give me like these 4 paragraphs of stuff. And I'm like, I still don't like, my head is so in knowing what's going on in trans world. And I have no idea what you're talking about. Who is this person? What is this law you're talking about? What country you even mention it? And then finally we get through. And then I can just put it in like 5 words in a tweet, like Germany passes
Hmm.
new law or something. And it's like, why couldn't you communicate that to me simply? But different skills,
Yeah.
I guess.
Different skills, different skills.
But
But it was
anyway,
a good
it
question.
seems like we're split and we agreed on the
Yeah,
split, so it's good. So let's
yeah.
see what we have to say this week. So this is a bit of news, and maybe we'll mention all of the news and our answers to this. But Germany and Sweden have both very recently passed new laws allowing trans people to change their legal documents a lot easier. And obviously, in countries such as the UK and the US, where things are happening, that's currently not the case. Do you think that the countries that are going the wrong way will catch up? Or do you think that we're just on completely different trajectories and we will never catch up? I have faith that, not faith, I don't like using the word faith, especially on this show. I feel like I have a reasonable belief based on evidence of how we've seen previous civil rights movements go in both the UK and the US, that eventually we will get to the point where all of the UK and most of the US allows this in a better way than it does today. But Josie, I know that there's a big court case going on in the US at the moment. I don't know if it really links into this. But anyway, what do you think? What do you think about the answer to this question?
This question, well, I think the UK is way further behind, unfortunately, than the US. I think that in the US currently, we do kind of have self ID in a lot of ways. Like you can go get your license changed, and there's very few states that have any type of requirements that force you to get a sex change and things like that. So we're already moving in the right directions. For example, in the United States, you can change your passport to an X marker. And so in a sense, I feel like the US is already getting there. And I don't know, outside of a specific law, outside of like the Equality, Act and going through the, Congress and the House would be more of a protective class. I don't think that the US is really built to have like a self ID type of system, because it's just our fundamental rights to be in the way our constitution is written and how our laws are implicated. So it's hard to say. I guess in the spirit of things, I do think that the US will get there in the spirit of what is happening in Germany and Sweden.
Do you think all the states will? Because, I mean, I know some of your states are like the best places in the world, and then others of them are like Hungary and Russia.
Yeah, like say Florida, for example, right? Like Florida has tried to, stop the ability for people to change their IDs on driver's license. Well, that's being challenged in the courts right now, and they can't officially do what they're saying. So in fact, what would have to happen is the opposite would have to happen, right? We would have to lose the rights that we've already garnered, even in states like Florida. Right now, where we start to see weird issues is now like birth certificates. Florida's trying to do something weird with like sex and gender on birth certificates, but in reality, the conservatives or the transphobes have to actually fight legal precedent to actually reverse what is already there for people. So it's like there's hope in that regard, right? That we would be able to do that. So Florida hasn't been able to actually get people to force them to take their IDs off their license, but they're trying. They're trying.
They are trying.
And we are definitely fighting it though.
They're trying it here, not with driving licenses. Interestingly, like the UK is way behind on some stuff, like compared to the US, but there are just some things where we just have it like right by a long way. So for example, changing your name in the UK, you can just write your own letter, like on Microsoft Word. I've changed my name to this. Get two of your friends to sign it, and it's done. That's it. It doesn't cost anything. No like official stamps. No bullshit seeing a judge. And it's the same with like driving licenses. They just don't say your sex on them because they don't need to.
Right.
And when you want to change your driving license, you're just like, oh yeah, it used to say Mr. Can it now say Ms? And they're like, yep, and it's just done. But
we need a
obviously
court
we
order
have all
in America.
Yeah,
we need to go to court. Like, in California, it's nearly $500 to do, right? To just go and be able to do all of that case, right? Because submitting a case in California is expensive, while other states are like very cheap. So there's a lot of barriers, but yeah, you have to have a judge say you are female and you
But
are this person now, and then you have to
in order
publish it in the
to,
paper in some places.
yeah, that's pretty cringe.
Yeah.
They did have that here in this some places where you used to have to or do have to publish your name change in a paper, but I think you can get. I never did. I didn't have to.
Yeah.
But in the UK, if we wanted currently, if we want to change our birth certificate, we have to do the most ridiculous bullshit backwards process, which involves, like sending a detailed description of your genitals and some man you've never met who's given his opinion on your fashion choices and stuff off to a panel of men you'll never meet to decide whether you get to update it or not. And that's the kind of thing that Germany and Sweden have just moved away from, and loads of other countries have in Europe and Canada and several other places. In Australia, they have too, in lots of places. And I know the US is ahead on that kind of thing. Like even in places where you have to go to court, you don't have to bring 3 different doctors, a solicitor, like a description of your genitals, all this kind of rubbish.
Not all of them. Some states have some weird stuff. But no, I actually do have a letter from my surgeon that is notarized with the seal and everything that says that I had bottom surgery. Just in case the world ever really, really ripped to shit. I have my letter. It's like, look, I have the thing.
Yeah, I got the same. I got so much stupid documentation. Do you though?
So
this is the real bullshit trans documentation test. Do you have a 2-page letter describing how convincing and feminine your fashion choices are? Because I do.
Oh,
by
not
an
the
official professional. So even commenting on my
2 psychologist letters.
2? Amateur. I got like 5. One of mine was rejected because he had the wrong grammar in a sentence. He said something like, rather than "it is my belief that Katy Montgomerie is a transsexual female" or something, he said, "it is my belief that transsexual female Katy Montgomerie is," or something like that. And they were like, "No, we're not accepting this one." And it was just
I had one
screwed it up when he was writing it.
I had one that they were like, "Oh, this is a year old. We need a newer one." I'm like, "What? Like, what the hell?" So yeah, so technically I do have 3, the same one with a different date.
Ridiculous. Right, just before we move into calls, I did just want to, because I mentioned we might cover the news, and also I mentioned at the start how trans rights are over, and also why I've asked this question, linking all these things together. If you're in the UK, you might have seen every single transphobe on earth talking about the Cass report and how it's the end of trans rights. And if you're following in the US, you might have seen how there's the Supreme Court is taking a case to see whether it's constitutional to ban trans healthcare. And both of these are kind of the same thing. And there are other countries which have had similar things where their organized like transphobe movement has got to the point where the people in power get to make the decision whether it's okay to overrule all the evidence we have and take healthcare away from trans children. And in the UK, it looks like, at least in the short term, they have succeeded in doing that, which is pretty bleak. Obviously, for the transphobes, this is like the sign that God is returning and the rapture is happening and they were all proved right and everything's coming true. Obviously, that isn't the case. But I wanted to highlight this Germany and Sweden thing because in some countries where it is kind of scary and things kind of are moving backwards and the science deniers do seem to have a lot of power, most of the world is just kind of just chugging on. Like, I know in the US you've had all these propaganda points like, well, actually in Europe they're rolling back trans rights, including Sweden. And then it's like Sweden's like, oh yeah, by the way, we just passed this law where it's a lot easier for Sweden's allowing 16-year-olds to change their legal sex without their parent or guardian. And in Germany, they're allowing 14-year-olds to do it as long as you get a legal representative involved. And under 14-year-olds can do it with a parent or guardian. So like these countries are kind of really moving forwards. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a ramble. Josie, how do you feel about the chance of the US Supreme Court case? And then we'll get into some calls.
Yeah. So I am not a legal scholar by any means. However, when we take a look at what happened, just to be quick, is like Idaho had a law that was submitted to basically ban gender affirming care for minors, and the Supreme Court allowed the stay to happen. Removed the stay, which allows all other. So the plaintiffs, they got gender affirming care, but everybody else in the state of Idaho can't. So I know the ACLU is still working, and we are hoping that we're going to be able to continue to fight this, but it is a major setback. And the thing that is incredibly important to note about this is we're starting to see what the opinion of the court is on the greater idea of gender affirming healthcare for people under the age of 18. So it is a very scary ruling, and for people who have courts going in, this does show that the pattern of these conservative justices that exist in the United States are going to continue the warpath against our civil liberties when it comes to trans people, and also just gay marriage and other things are also on the chopping block in the future as well. So it's a very scary time, and that's why our election cycle in November is so important, because we need to replace these justices like ASAP, and we cannot afford another bad election to move forward, at
Yeah.
all.
Scary times.
So it's scary
for sure.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that keeps me having, again, I don't want to say faith, hope, is that they're having to use, in the UK, they're doing their best to obscure the science. This report, maybe you've not heard of it, they basically said, here's 100 studies showing, 100 studies on trans healthcare. They all say the same thing, but we're discarding 99 of them because we don't think they're good enough quality, even though we're disagreeing with all of the experts in every other country. But they're doing their best to obscure the science. But in the US, you're still on that kind of, well, the court should overrule the science angle. And either way, they are just fighting against evidence, and they are fighting against the science. And even if they manage to outlaw it in whatever way they do, they're not going to be able to hide the evidence forever. You just cannot fight science forever. It's just impossible. So that gives me some hope. But the problem is that you can fight science for decades.
You can.
Or even longer.
And that's why everything's political. Everything's political. Your votes matter.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that we put people in the power that actually believe in science and care about people's fundamental rights.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Vote. Right. Let's take some calls. We've jabbered on long enough. So let's talk to Julie in California, who wants to talk about cognitive dissonance. And I see the word glinner. Julie, what's your question?
I knew that if I said glinner, I would get Katy's attention immediately. So,
oh God, don't say it like that.
To Julie.
Inflate his ego.
So actually, my discussion comes straight into exactly what you've been saying. So it seems like in the wake of things like the WPATH files and the CAST review, all these different, anti-trans groups have started nonstop yelling, Glinner was right, TERFs were right. Even I just checked Graham's Twitter account, his banner is just this giant poster of Glinner was right. And it's
so embarrassing, isn't it?
You can say Glinner was right from here till the cows come home. It's not going to make you any less divorced or get your Steam account back. Nor is it going to change, in the big picture, it's not going to change the decisions that all major professional medical organizations in the world are doing. And it's not even just the UK. I mean, in the US, just kind of a little shameless self-promotion, if you let me, but I follow all the detransition or lawsuits that are going on in the US under the hashtag #DetransLaw on Twitter or X. And just this week, there was a ruling in the Chloe Cole, Chloe Brockman case that really all it said is that the judge denied Kaiser's motion to compel arbitration, which really was just a technicality on a contract law that Chloe's mom signed back in 2005 and had no merit on judgment or standing on the merit case. It was have to be the court.
Oh, I'm getting some weird sound.
Dylan,
sorry, Julie, you suddenly started echoing. Arden, you hearing this?
Yeah, you might get better reception.
I got you guys. No, I hear exactly.
Okay,
I'll take this off.
Oh, okay.
So going back to what's going on in the U.S., with the detransitioner lawsuits and, the way that these political attorneys are trying to use this for political gain, Harmeet Dillon, who has been long trying to become a GOP mainstay, is the one in charge of Chloe Cole's case, and she's now using this ruling that has nothing to do with the case itself or the merits of the case itself to, demand that now it's settled. Chloe's going to get millions of dollars from Kaiser, and she's probably going to go on Ingram Mingle. Mm-hmm.
They do this all the time. I think you talking about this Glenna was right thing. When you started talking about that, I was gonna my angle was gonna be gender critical and the wider anti-trans movement is a cult. Gender critical particularly is a cult. They really think there's this big day coming where everyone's going to be proved right and Glenna's wife's going to come back and he'll get his musical and J.K. Rowling will be knighted and become a saint.
Katy and Josie are going to regret their transitions and
we'll be hung in the street upside down. Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, some of them say that to me. They're like, you just wait. Any day soon. This year will be your last, and all this kind of rubbish. And it is a cult with cult belief systems. But part of how all cults operate, and specifically how we're seeing the anti-trans propaganda work is when they win even the tiniest thing, they blow it up to a massive win. They always use the word landmark and. This is the biggest thing and we've totally destroyed trans people. And even when they lose, they do that. I don't know if you followed, there was a court case here in the UK which ended up being big just because of the huge amount of money that got poured into it. But there's some gender critical wacko who was a barrister and proposed that Stonewall, the LGBT rights organization, had done some conspiracy to ruin her career. And she's called Alison Bailey, and she managed to raise £500,000 to take this to court. And the court ruled that basically everything she said was a conspiracy theory, apart from during the time her employers let her go or something, one of them posted about it on Twitter, and it was not very professional. So she won something I can't remember what it was, £30,000 compensation from her employer. But the whole majority of the court case, they just threw out. And she spent £500,000 on it. And then every single newspaper was like, Alison Bailey wins court case. Gender ideology destroyed. Trans people in despair. And it's just they do this because they don't have anything else. And they need to keep up this constant hype cycle for their cultists to be engaged. Because otherwise it's boring. Nothing's happening. That they need to feel like they're winning to keep their goons constantly donating money to them and stuff. It's part of how they operate. But yeah, it sounds like I didn't know anything about this Chloe Cole thing that you're mentioning, but it just sounds the same pattern every time, for sure.
Yeah, and the case is still ongoing, right?
No. So I was going to tell Katy. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So what I was going to say with Katy is that it's not even just the Alison Bailey case. If you look at they keep touting the Keira Bell case as if Keira Bell won, when in fact, number one, she lost, and number two, she ended up owing the Tavistock for their legal fees and ended up fundraising after the case was over because she still owed that money and couldn't pay them back. But with the Chloe Cole case is still ongoing.
Okay.
I'm not even going to go there. But the Chloe Cole case, go ahead on Josie.
No, I was going to say the Chloe Cole case, that case is still going to go, right? Or or is the court not even hearing the case at all?
No, all the rulings said, so Kaiser, there are 3 detransitioner lawsuits where they sued Kaiser. 2 of them actually did get compelled into binding arbitration, the Richard Anumene and Layla Jane, who her name is Kayla Lovedoll, who's like the counterpart to Chloe Cole. Those 2 got sent to binding arbitration. All that happened here is that Kaiser got denied the motion to compel her into binding arbitration based on a technicality on the union contract for healthcare that Chloe's mom signed back in 2005. Like, it has nothing to do with the case itself. It's still just going to go to court. That's it. It's not going to go to
this is how they get
arbitration.
through with this stuff, though. Like this, I'm sure everything you said is true. It just means nothing to me. And that's how they can sell this stuff. Like, when you say someone was denied the right for arbitration or whatever you said, like, genuinely meaningless. So when the transphobes say, we won, everyone just reacts like that. And all of the right-wing news sites and newspapers will just blindly publish that they've won and they're destroying gender ideology. And then trans people react in despair because we're constantly besieged and worrying. And then we kind of inflate their view that they've won as well.
Yeah, which is, I mean, mainly my point was kind of if it's even worth engaging with them. But I think you're kind of answering my question that it is worth engaging with them, if only to assuage the trans community that it isn't the big deal that they're making it out to be, and, help us realize that it's not doom and gloom and that this is meaningless in the big picture and you shouldn't take these people seriously. Not for them, but for us.
Yeah, I think that is a key part of like LGBT rights activism, is keeping up morale. Like, when, I don't know, Josie, you probably also hear things before they're going to happen. I often hear something bleak the night before it's going to happen, just before I go to bed, and I'm just like, oh man, I just need to vent this. I just want to go on Twitter at 1 a.m. and be like, we're all going to die. And it's all terrible. But I know if I do that, all that I'm really doing is contributing to like fear and despair.
The big issue that we deal with in nationwide big grass tops organizing is trying to not have the reactionaries go on and say the world's going to end. Like, for example, the Florida case, right? About like the thing we were just talking about, like Florida doing this thing with the DMV. Yes, they submitted this law. Yes, it's horrible, but it didn't even go anywhere at all. Like, it's like we're crushing this. We're going to win this, and we're going to make the organizations that filed this look like complete clowns for even trying it, right? But before we're able to get out that message saying everything is okay, we're winning these cases, it's already gone 10 miles out saying, oh my God, the world is ending. Like, if you're going to be forced and tried if you're in Florida, like, it does our community no good when that happens, right? Like, when we say, okay, 500 LGBTQ law or anti-trans bills last year were being proposed, well, only like, I think 5%, maybe less, actually passed anything. And a lot of them were very, obviously they affect people and they're a problem. But we are winning like 95% plus of these cases. So like, when we focus on like the victory of it, and now we're actually winning, and we're actually like winning elections, we are winning all of these different things that are happening. It's like, if we can spin it in the other angle, we can really show that the other side is desperate. They have no chance of winning things that are legitimate. We're going to crush them in every way possible. Yes, they'll get a win here and there, but that's just the nature of the world. But in the end, we will, it's like the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards, towards justice, right? It does. It bends, right? And it goes, and it takes a long time. But we are very reactionary.
We are very reactionary because one, it actually affects us. I think it's a very uneven battlefield because it actually affects our day-to-day lives. It could affect our future. It could affect like your living conditions in an instant if they passed a certain law. And so that's way more stressful. And for the transphobes, it doesn't affect them at all. It's their income, whether they get to be a celebrity or not, whether they get to go on Fox News. And another thing is, it's all them attacking. Like, we do get the occasional win, like in Germany and in Sweden, where they've just passed these new laws, and they're quite a big deal. But even then, they're not really a big deal. It's like the mildest thing. We've made it slightly easier for some trans people to change their ID, which they don't really show to many people. Whereas the like most of the wins we have are, in Florida they're not going to be able to ban you from driving, and that doesn't feel like a win. It's so hard to sell that as a win, that it doesn't. Like, it still feels exhausting when they file like 100 cases, they lose 99 of them, and we lose one, and then it's like, oh god, we lost some rights. It's just like,
yeah. It's going to be a constant fight, but luckily we have really intelligent, incredible people that are in the front lines of that fight, and we will continue to win, and then we'll eventually start winning the big ones, like the Equality Act that's going to pass, and then I think the UK, like you said, they can't deny science forever. It's just not going to happen. Like it's like when you start looking at the evidence, it's like I do believe that we will get there, and it doesn't change the fact that there are people in Idaho right now not receiving their life-saving care, right? And I want to make that very clear, is that when we do have situations like that, we need to do everything in our power to make sure that people who are directly affected by these laws are supported immediately, either getting them out of the state, figuring out if there's a way that we can connect them with services that allows them to do it. It's exactly what's happening with the abortion access movement as well. It's like we're winning most of the time, but then Nevada will happen, or then Florida will happen, and then we have to okay, now how are we going to rally around the people of those affected and actually do that? And that is how you should spend our energy when it comes to doom and gloom. We should be spending our energy on those affected rather than the perceived effect that is happening when a bill gets introduced, right? And I think that's where our movement can be much more accurate and agile of spending that energy when it needs to be spent, instead of just throwing it into the doom scroll, right? And I feel like that's where the big issue is with our community right now, is there's just so much reaction and there isn't enough action when it matters.
Yeah. So I think, by the sound of it, Julie, what you're doing is good and useful.
Mm-hmm.
If you can communicate, if you can get the latest propaganda court case bullshit and translate it into something that someone who doesn't know anything about law understands, and also something that the trans community will understand as either panic because something bad has happened, or in most cases, actually, it's not as bad as they're presenting it, and here's why. That is really useful. Because I couldn't read any of these court cases and know what's going on.
Yeah, and kind of to give you guys a perspective, of all the court cases I follow, none of them are going well for these people. They're losing miserably. There's only one court case that I think has a case against her surgeon, because she does actually detail medical malpractice in her aftercare, and I think she has a case against her surgeon. But 4 of the other defendants, who are her psychiatric and endocrinological team, already got dismissed because she really doesn't have a case against them. So I try to be a realist when I can about these, but they really are not going well. And hopefully, that does some sort of good for people.
And I just want to, just for the neutral parties, people who don't know what's going on, and the hate watchers, we aren't here cheering on detrans people losing court cases. If a detrans person has experienced medical malpractice or negligence at all anywhere in their healthcare that they received, they should be allowed to sue, and the doctors should lose, and they should get compensation and help and any healthcare they need to resolve the issue. We're talking, or at least I believe Julie is talking about, and this is how I'm reading it, about the high-profile, right-wing, detrans-centered cases with the goal of banning all trans healthcare on the grounds that one person suffered, therefore everyone should lose out.
Absolutely.
And they are very difficult. They're very different things. Because this one you're saying where someone's experienced medical malpractice, I hope that they get the compensation. I hope the doctor has, if that's what actually happened, then the doctor should deal with that. We just don't want to see the ludicrous argument where someone detransitioned, therefore thousands of trans people should lose out on healthcare.
Yeah, in that case specifically, actually, it's the trans community that has rallied against this specific surgery center. It's the Crane Center, which has a terrible perception in the trans community because so many people have been harmed by them. And I honestly think that we're the first to call them out when this happens. But the vast majority of these cases, they're basically saying they experienced medical malpractice because they regretted the care years down the line, not because their medical providers did anything wrong. They didn't actually experience, malpractice. They just regret their care. And that has never been, grounds for medical malpractice. I mean, you can't sue Planned Parenthood if you regret your abortion 10 years later. They provided the abortion, you got it. That's it. And that's why they will get thrown out of court. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks for the information, Julie. And it's useful. It's a good comparison for people who regret abortions. But I actually think it's an even better comparison of people who regret not getting abortions, because the regret rate for having kids is like 50%. So maybe you should be able to sue your doctor for not pressuring you into getting an abortion because you regret it.
I like that.
Because the regret rate for abortion is much higher than the regret rate for trans healthcare, but it's still quite low. So
it's 10%.
Yeah, I mean, that's higher than it should be, but like for knee surgery, it can be as high as 20 or 30%. So we're not wanting to ban anything here, unless the regret rate is like 100% or something. That's a different story. But anyway, thank you for your call, Julie. It was very informative and it was a good discussion. We hope to hear from you in the future. Josie, I don't know if you can see any, if you're looking at the calls. If not, I'll just pick one. I don't know if you had any ideas. Okay, so we're going to take a potentially spicy one. We're going to talk to Rogue Show in South Carolina, perhaps, who is wants to talk about why gender and race are different and why you can't identify as a different race. Rogue Show, go for it.
Hello, is my mic any good?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. So I am pro-trans. Sorry, it's ruined the spice.
Oh, rubbish.
But
say some slurs when you ask a question.
No. No, that's a good start. I that's okay. Go ahead.
And I get the argument from time to time about, oh, well, this guy's why can he identify as black? And
right.
I just want advice like how to counter that.
How do you address that argument when someone says, yeah?
I mean, sorry,
I think I know the question you're asking. That's okay. I do see people saying, if you can identify as a gender, then why can't you identify as a race? They're the same thing. Therefore, blah, blah, blah. And it's one of those things where they make like a rubbish comparison and hope that no one actually like looks into it, because they're actually like radically different things. I talked loads on the last one. Josie, do you want to start off on this one?
Yeah, sure. Give me the fun one.
I can go first if you like.
No, it's fine. So it's interesting because people are using two completely different social constructs and trying to compare them to be the same. Usually when I start with this conversation, I always say it's like, comparing one social construct of like the value of money, which is a social construct, to the colors of the why we call colors different colors as well. It's like you can't really compare them, right? And they're trying to use two social identities and trying to compare the two social identities and say, oh, if I can be one social identity, then I can just change another social identity. They also do this with age as well. It's like, oh, if I can identify as a woman, 10, then I can identify as 16. It's like, no, you can't, because they're trying to conflate two completely different constructs, right? Gender is something that is a character that we have inside, that that is socially constructed, that society has said, okay, this is femme, this is, this is masculine, this is, all of the different things that exist in gender, while race is something that is assigned to people through the social construct of society and things like that. So the problem with those conversations, though, is that a lot of times when somebody's asking about race and gender, they're not really asking these things in good faith. Right. So a lot of times when you're having never people aren't being like they're like, oh, I really think about trans issues, but why can't you do it? I just want to know, for the curiosity of my soul, why can't I just identify as Black? It's like, they're not asking that in good faith, and they're trying to get you in a gotcha. Right. So you always have to think about that in the forefront of, like, is the conversation that you're having going to be good faith at all? Right. Because sometimes the reaction and the conversation that you're having is already a dead end. Right. Where it's just like, oh, I'm going to try to give an intellectual conversation about what the difference and nuances between the social construction of race and the social construction of gender. And then all of a sudden you say the things, and then people are like, but why can't I identify as Black, though? Right? And it's just like, and then like completely ignore everything that you had to say, and then again conflate the two social constructions. So a lot of times you have to be like, why do you ask that question? Right? Is maybe a better way to go about it. It's like, okay, so you're asking, why can't somebody be Black or when they're white, versus trans. We have a mountain of evidence that supports gender and understands why people have internal sense of gender. We have gender dysphoria. It's been studied, beyond studied, and we have a medical historical record of understanding why gender identity is the way that it is. Maybe you ask them, why are you comparing the two? Why do you think the two are the same? And then usually from there you can actually get more answers of why they're asking that question, or if they just have a fundamental misunderstanding between race and gender, right? So I know I kind of spoke around that a little bit, but I'd love for you to respond, and then I'll give Katy a shot on that. But yeah.
I think putting the puzzle pieces together, wouldn't it be I guess great to, like, or in the offshoot that it is good faith. I'm not rejecting what you're saying, because that's mostly, comparing the two is mostly bad faith. But in the offshoot, when you say make the distinction, saying something like, hey, gender is a identity, and race is a label. But why do you ask this? But why are you asking this question?
I don't think you can make that distinction, really, because I think race is an identity for a lot of people, and it isn't for some people, and it's kind of complicated. I hear what you're saying, though. In the case, when do you want to take on this like, if you do just want to sit down and have a philosophical discussion, what's the argument? I think I usually take this on in one of two or maybe more ways. The first thing I would say is, when people say identifies as, what are they actually saying? Like, when I say, like, what sex do you identify as, or what sexuality do you identify as, that's kind of a buzz phrase that people use. But what I'm saying is, like, how do you describe yourself? If I'm saying, are you gay, or are you straight, or are you bisexual, what sexuality do you identify as? I'm not saying, what, like, thing do you want to pretend you are today? Like, that's often how transphobes try and use the word. They're like, oh yeah, a trans person is just a man who identifies as a woman. Like, no, when I'm saying, what are you? That's the answer to the question. What do you identify as? What are you? Well, when I say, like, I don't go around saying, actually, I identify as a woman. I would just be like, I am a woman. That is just the answer to the question, what are you, when we're talking about sex and gender. And that is, when I say I am a woman, that is the process of me identifying as a woman, in the same way that when J.K. Rowling says, I'm a woman, she is also identifying as a woman because she is describing herself as a woman, and she believes that is the best way to describe herself. And it's the same with race.
Awesome.
When you are identifying as a race, you are describing what race you are. And like, we can say, oh yeah, race and gender and sex and sexuality are all very different constructs for sure. But I think when it's important to, when we look at race, is to understand that it's often the whole foundation of race is constructed to make this hierarchy where white people are at the top. And you can see this in how some groups of people didn't used to be white and now they're considered white. Like very famously, Irish people, Italians and stuff who didn't count as white in the USA in the 40s and now they do. And if you asked an Italian person, like, what's your race? Got them to fill in a form, an Italian American, they would almost certainly tick white if that was the option. They probably wouldn't fill in other and write Italian or something. Yeah. Well, but maybe in the 40s that would have been slightly different, whereas nothing has actually changed. Like, if you took someone from then to now, their genetics are exactly the same, their history of their family is the same, their upbringing is the same, but where we consider them in the racial groups that we've just like made up in society is kind of what race they are. And when people answer the question, what race are you, they're responding not necessarily, like they'll probably be responding to their personal identity and their upbringing, but also to these wider social constructs. And there are people who sit on the borders and the boundaries of what society views as like white and black and, all the various other things, where they might be like, well, most people read me as white, but that isn't really how I'd identify myself because blah, 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 maybe that's not their family heritage or, that isn't how their upbringing was. And you could say, oh, so you're just being a white person or identify as a black person. That isn't really what's going on here. What you're doing is you're giving them this really, these really sort of square boxes with strict edges saying you must fit into one of these two boxes. And they're like, well, I don't really. But if you ask me which one I have to be in, then maybe I could give you an answer. And maybe you wouldn't agree with it because you don't know enough about me to make that judgment. And that's kind of why when we say, like, what do you identify as? And this term, like, self-ID, people trying to use it negatively, but you are the person who knows best. Like, I don't know if you're, you're from a different country or your family is from a different heritage. And I don't know that, or I'm only hearing your voice. Like, all this kind of stuff. I could ask you what race you are and you could tell me, maybe you're lying. It's the same. Maybe you could tell me about your sex and your gender history and maybe you're lying. But the reality is the person who knows best is you. And you're probably going to tell me, in most cases, the correct thing or the thing you understand the best. So when you say, why can't a white person identify as a black person? It's like, well, they can lie, but they're going to, in an official capacity, when they're not being a bad faith bellend, they're going to say, I'm a white person. Because that's true, and that's how they would describe themselves. And that's exactly what trans people are doing. Like when me and Josie say who we are, it's the same as when you say it, or when your mum says it, or when your friends say it. It's just a truthful description of our lives. But I do have a part two, and maybe a more objective way of looking at this. When if you're talking with someone who really is being a bellend and is going out of their way to not understand everything, is to point out, and like Josie mentioned it, is that we have like hundreds of years of studying trans people. We have hundreds of studies showing how there are people in basically every culture that's ever existed who have wanted to, in some form or other, transition. Maybe that's just a class of people who transition social roles from male to female and vice versa, or maybe there's an extra third category or more. categories, or there are people who medically transition, people who try and blend in, people who try and break down the binary system that we're presented with. These exist like across every culture throughout time. We know that when we give these people medical healthcare to help them transition their sex characteristics, it benefits their well-being. We know that these like identities these people have aren't just like fleeting, that they are durable. I can't remember what Adair says, durable mental construct, whatever it is, but like these identities are who these people are. And we have all this evidence, all this scientific stuff, we can see it actually happening. We can make real predictions. We can say, when a person comes to me and presents all of these symptoms, I know that if I prescribe them medical transition, it will benefit their lives. With like 99% accuracy, I can make that prediction. And we can see that in the data. We don't have any of that for people who want to transition race. We don't have hundreds of years of it. We don't have data showing that it works or it does anything. But even in the case where we did, like, so let's just say we find someone and they genuinely, whatever that means, they were like, I am feeling real distress over my race and I want to transition race, whatever that means. We'd have to look and say, well, what does it mean to change race? Like, race isn't just about skin color and like shapes of your face and textures of your skin, all these other things that people lump into race, because it's also your like shared heritage and your culture. And maybe some people, like if you were a white person who was adopted by a black family in a majority black country, maybe you would have the shared heritage, but you would still maybe stand out in like a physical capacity. And maybe if you did, we were like, right, I'm going to go through these procedures, or maybe vice versa, or whatever it is, for whatever reason. Okay. Like, so what? Like, what does this mean? Like, does that now mean trans people are bullshit or shouldn't get healthcare, or like, so what? I mean, we don't have any evidence that people want to do this, and we don't have any evidence that it's like a real construct or a real issue or something that's really happened. But if it did, like, okay, I don't care. I don't know. What do you think to those?
Sorry, I'm autistic, right. So I have a hard time getting words out.
You're good.
I'm just trying to like put the what I said, like put the puzzle pieces together, just in case I get some of the cinnamon
I will say that
of bad faith acts.
Sorry,
we know you're not being bad.
I interrupted it. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, continue.
Like, just in case I get some cinnamon-y conversation about trans people, and they bring up the whole, why can't I identify as black? I guess, I'm sorry if I'm not hitting the myth. I'm sorry if I'm not understanding this. If I'm not understanding this, but is race more of a culture? Is race more of a cultural thing, and gender more of an individual? Or in fact,
I don't think so.
Individually. Oh.
I don't think so. I think they're both. I think they're both very big, messy things that have parts of them which, like, I wouldn't ever want to say gender or race were biological, but depending on what biological characteristics you have at birth and in your life later on, you will be forced into boxes, both on gender and race, whether you want to or not. And that affects your life. That affects, what opportunities you have, affects how people interact with you and everything. And that will affect your individual identity, but it also affects politically the group of people who are like you. But I think what's important really is that there is no real sense to where we draw the lines on race at all. They're very historically created to oppress people. That's kind of the general gist. I mean, we can say like, oh yeah, you have similar skin color to me or whatever, but that isn't how people do it. Like, it's about trying to create some hierarchy. And there is that hierarchy in sex and gender too, but we also have the kind of underpinning of reproductive sex where there are some real differences that are kind of inescapable in a way that just appearance and culture aren't.
Like since gender roles are fluid. Correct me if I'm wrong. You would generally, maybe it's egalitarian. Maybe the definition of being a man, I guess, is egalitarian. Is sort of an egalitarian thing. Maybe it's under women or or patriarchal, like the society we live in now. Sorry, am I making sense?
I didn't quite get your point. But
I think I wanted to add something too, and it's something about how you don't want to get sucked into conversations that become very messy and annoying because it's the grounds of the conversation, right? Because I understand you're talking about like this philosophical conversation of somebody in good faith, but I cannot get away from the point of just trying to have the conversation between race and gender is already shaky ground to have a debate on in the first place because of all of these structural things. Race has a lot to do with oppression, right? It has a lot to do with like pan-Europeanism going into whiteness, and then all other races are in proximity to whiteness. And there's so much theory and understanding around what that means. There's perceived race, there's colorism, there's so many other things that are involved with like race, and most people when they grow up and they understand, it's like, yes, there are races in the world. There are Black people, there are Asian people, there are white people. And it's something that we kind of like grow up with. It's something that we kind of understand in society. And a lot of people have a deep philosophical understanding of why somebody can't be white and go, hey, I'm actually Black though, right? I can use the N-word, right? And like, which a lot of those bad faith conversations is, it's like, I'm a white person, why can't I identify as Black, and then start using the N-word, right? Like, I've seen people try to use that line of reasoning, which is in bad faith. And so you don't have to abide by the conversation of like, if I can be trans, then I can be Black. If you're a white person, is not a good philosophical place to begin. It's easier to say, okay, before we get started in the conversation, do you believe that trans people exist? Do you believe that trans people deserve rights? Do you believe that trans people deserve, the basic human dignity to be able to live as the people that they're perceived as? Start there and be like, okay, so we agree that trans people exist. Great. Let's go ahead and move away from gender. And now we can have a philosophical conversation about why race is the way that it is as a construct. But that does not prove anything away from gender or anything like that. And I think that's the best thing that I would do, because in my opinion, conflating race and gender is already like a dangerous ground to begin with, because you can't compare the two. They're completely different things and have completely different oppression structures around them.
I think it's like, really, you should treat it as exactly the same way as if someone was like, if I said, oh, what sexuality are you? And then someone's like, oh, I've actually had sex with men and women in my past, but I actually only I would only call myself gay because I'm not attracted to, men anymore or something. And I was like, oh, so what? You think you can just identify as gay? Why can't you just identify as black then? Like, it's the same bullshit. Like, you would just be like, what are you talking about? The reason why they're saying they're gay is because they know what their sexuality is, and their actions in the past don't define their sexuality. Like, they're the only person on earth who knows what their sexuality is. What are you talking about? How is this anything like race? And it's basically the same argument. I mean, you're saying, what? Because I think that woman is the best word to describe myself. That what? What are you even saying here? What does it even mean to identify as a different race? Like, this is just like a flatly nonsense argument, and they're just trying to get away with this weak comparison of, because you can change your sex and gender, therefore why don't we, like, what, can I just identify as being left-handed now all of a sudden? It's like, what does that even fucking mean, mate? Like, which pen do you hold your hand? Like, which hand do you hold your pen with? Like, that's the answer, isn't it? Like, you tell me. I don't know. I just think it's
just skirt away from it. Like, it's not. It's a very weak thing to do, and don't get yourself caught. And and I'm on the spectrum myself, and I love debate, and I love philosophical conversation, but there are some landmines that aren't worth the debate because the grounds are already twisted. So for like in a conversation like that, it's like, okay, let's talk about trans race. Is that really a thing? Like, let's not talk about trans people and get this in this conversation because it's already a mess. Like, because it just doesn't make sense. Like Katie said, it's like, what do you mean? It's like, it doesn't make sense. So don't get pulled into a conversation that is already flawed from the beginning.
Yeah. I guess I have one more question before I go. I know I've been hearing, I guess I'm kind of a little shaky, that shaky bridge that trans people are walking on and the rights in the U.S. How can I act? How can I be an act? Or how can I sort of stand up for trans people in a sense, like actively? Or what can
That's
I do
a really
to help?
good question.
What I'm asking.
Yeah, how can you be a good ally and how can you help? But that's a really good question. I think it would make its own good call. We've been on the line for 25 minutes. I don't want to just say like go away, but that would be a really great call for another time. So perhaps you can call in with it. I guess watch this show and stay informed. And if you have the time, maybe you can call in next week and have a discussion with us then. But thank you very much, Ricochet. That was a really good call. And
find your local LGBTQ community center and ask if you can volunteer or what resources that they would like and need.
Definitely. Volunteering is always useful. Before we go on to our next calls, I'd just like to point out that this show, despite being the best show on this channel, is not the only show on this channel, and we have a whole bunch of other shows coming up. We have Cause I Wanna on Saturday with Forrest and Roxanne. On Sunday, the Sunday show, we have Evil's Framed and Forrest again. Forrest is everywhere. Maybe we have 2 Sunday shows. Looks like we do. We have Eric SS and Matt Dillahunty. I seem to remember being told about that. There's a Sunday show at 2 p.m. and another one at 7 p.m. I guess that's Central. On Monday, we have Skep Talk, again with Forrest, who is just basically on every show. Apart from this one, he's too cis to be on this show. And Morticia. And then we have Chewed Gum with Evil's Framed and Alyssa Ljub. And then on Wednesday, we have Matt and Will... Judy, sorry I forgot your name wrong, on the Hang Up. And then we are back to the Transatlantic Call-In Show, the best show. But you should check out all these shows. They're all skeptic shows. They're all call-in shows. They all deal with people who believe things that are rubbish and people asking for advice for things. And if you like these shows, maybe you could click the like button. Maybe you could subscribe to our channel. Maybe you could even check out our Patreon. Maybe you could even check out our merch store. But while you're doing those things in the background, let's take another caller. I think I can take another one before I have to disappear. Let's see what we have here. We have one about passing. We have one about Work applications, and we have one about popular media. What do you like the sound of?
Ooh, passing is always an interesting one.
Okay, we're going to talk
be pretty spicy.
We're going to talk to Katy, the wrong kind of Katy with an IE from the USA, who wants to talk about passing and whether it matters. Katy, wrong Katy, what is your question?
Hi, hello, British Katy. But no, and also hello. I'm so sorry. Was it Jolene? I'm not watching your show, so I can't see your name. Josie. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. Hi. Just want to say, first of all, I love the show. Love what you guys do. Thank you for everything. Thank you for dealing with all these cis people and educating them. I would never have the patience. Thank you.
No worries.
But my question is, well, I have a few questions, but I can keep it to one because I don't want to hog the line. So basically, when it comes to passing, like, I don't know, like, it's hard to put it into exact words. Does it matter? Like, both, like, and does it matter personally and does it matter societally? Because, like, when I was younger and I was, like, very early in my transition, I thought it was, like, the most important thing in the world. I thought it was, like, literally what defined my happiness. And as I've gotten older, like, I don't know, I feel like I've just met a lot of other trans people who, like, kind of taught me, like, they're like, you know, you can be beautiful and not look cis, right? Like, that's not like mutually exclusive. So I don't know. I don't. What do y'all think? I've always been curious. I've seen the topic brought up a little bit here and there, but I've only been watching the show like for very recently, like the last couple months. So, like, I don't know. Just what's your feedback?
JC, do you want to go first or second?
Yeah, I would love that. No, I think I really appreciate you bringing it up because I think, you know, I'm only, you know, 4 years into my you know, coming out transition, whatever you want to call it, and I think a lot of trans people, because the way society puts everybody in gender roles in one bucket, boy, girl, and we as trans people want to kind of go into that space. You're like, okay, to be a girl, I gotta makeup dress, I gotta make sure my hair is nice so I don't get abused. I want to make sure that I'm safe, because that's what passing used to be in the past, right? Like when trans women would get together, they would all talk about passing because they didn't want to, you know, be abused by police officers on the street or harassed or worse, right? And so there was a lot of passing as safety, and especially in trans femme communities, passing was like a rite of passage. You know, kind of funny. It's like the word, right? So it's like you're going into society, you're accepted by society. That's the way society is. It's in this binary, so you have to do it. Now,
and it's
over
how you
time,
stay safe.
Yes, exactly, right? And when you're early in your transition, you really don't want to get a lot of people like attacking you and being like, "What are you like?" Or da, 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 da. And it's like a lot of anxiety involved with that. So it makes a lot of sense as somebody who's young to transition to be like, "Okay, I need to do these things so I can be perceived in society this way." I pass, right? As what the general colloquial term is. Now, I think just like any person who matures and goes through puberty and figures out like their style, oh, I don't like this type of makeup, oh, I don't like lipstick, or I don't like putting my hair this way, or this isn't my style anymore. You start feeling yourself and you start falling into that style that you really are becoming, the person that you're becoming. And I think a lot of people overcorrect at the beginning. They're like super hyper feminine, and then all of a sudden, like, it's not as feminine. It used to take me like 45 minutes to an hour to do my makeup when I first transitioned. Now it takes me 5 to 10, right? It's just how it is. And you know, does it Do I put makeup on because society tells me to put makeup on? No, I put makeup on because I enjoy it, because I'm feminine and I like it. It makes me feel nice, and it's for me,
and it's
not
fun.
for anybody else. Yeah, and it's fun, right? It's the feminine nature that I am, right? And so I think because society has become more accepting of trans people and more accepting of people, not just trans people, but just people just being gender nonconforming, people bending the gender, binary, and just like gender bending in their own sense as people walk around in society. I think we are now given a better palette of society. So therefore people can be like, actually, I don't want to do all of this stuff because it's actually not who I am. I'm just a trans person that presents this way. And it's a very personal thing, right? Now and so I think that's why you're feeling, oh, maybe I don't have to do the things that I did before. Now, I want to put a big disclaimer on this. If you are in an unsafe area that will not appreciate or like you being, visibly trans in some way, and it's a safety measure, going back to the traditional, what before trans women used to do just to survive walking the street, like, just going to living their everyday life, right? Then there is the safety aspect of, I need to pass because I need to survive, right? And that's a very unfortunate place that some people have to be, but I understand when people are in that place and why they're that way. But as far as like passing as a need, as society says, you must look like woman and that's the way you must be, that's incredibly toxic. When you are doing something that isn't for you and for somebody else, that's when it becomes toxic. But being feminine, being masculine in the traditional sense that society has put it in this time and place in society is not a crime, and it's not wrong, and it's okay, and we are free to be able to do those things on their own. So nobody should put value on passing because you're mandated to, and you shouldn't have any feeling of like, I need to pass, unless that's what you're wanting to do. You just want to fit societal standards. Fine. I grew up in a very Latina household, right? Like it was like women are very specific in the way that they dress and all that type of stuff. And it's just how I was brought up. So that's why I kind of present the way I do. But that's because that's what I like. But it's not because I'm doing it for society's sake. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it does. I am. Oh, I'm sorry. Katie, did you want to say anything, or Catty? I should say. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you're getting catty. Wait. I pretty much agree with Josie. I think that passing really matters when it's like your safety or your ability to live your life on the line. I've definitely been in situations where I've been passing and been thinking, fucking hell, I really hope they don't clock me because this will go really badly. Quite a few times. It's not a good place to be in always. But yeah, sometimes it's just really important, like when you're traveling to places or when you live in places which are not accepting of trans people. Also, when you want to get taken seriously by bigoted people, sometimes you come up against healthcare professionals or people working in administrative roles. If you pass, they're just going to let you go through. And if you don't, then they're going to make your life worse. And I think, lots of trans people have experienced this. So, like, in those senses, it's very important. But in other senses, it's not at all. Even in those things, like, you don't have to be able to pass in Saudi Arabia to live your life if you live in California. Like, it doesn't matter at all. If the people around you treating you well and you're able to live your life well and you're happy with your appearance and where you are in your like medical transition, if at all, then that's great. And you don't need I don't feel this like abstract pressure of like, what if I end up in a situation where I'm like traveling in Morocco and the bus breaks down? Like, don't get yourself in that situation if that's going to be a worry. Like, you need to make sensible calls. But like, certainly there's this on the other hand, there's this like, or in a different context, there's this definitely a certain type of young trans person who puts a lot of value in passing. And I think maybe if you're able to pass, maybe that's more likely to happen. I don't know. When I first encountered this when I was transitioning or considering transitioning, I thought I'm probably never going to pass. I was probably a bit defeatist and depressed about it. And I thought, well, do I need to be happy? And do I need to be safe? And I experimented by like going out in the world, presenting differently when I obviously didn't pass. I mean, I passed as a trans woman. I did not pass as a cis woman. Everyone instantly clocked me as trans, and that affects how people interact with you. And I did that for a bit, and I was like, I can live with this. Every now and then I get a horrible comment from someone, or much more often, every now and then I get some fucking creeper hitting on me. But I can live with that. And so that was like what enabled me to just come out and start transitioning. And now I've ended up in a situation where I am where I am, and you can make your own judgments. But I think if I had, I know I have encountered trans people who have transitioned, and people who are very jammed in the closet who haven't, because they value passing so much. It's like dictated their life. Some people, it stops them from transitioning. They're like, I'm never going to pass, or I shouldn't transition. And that's going to ruin their life, having that attitude. I mean, if you live in a place where you coming out is going to end your life unless you disappear and pass in another place, like, I understand. But if you're putting your own value on it, if you're like, I will be less of a person if I don't pass, like I'll be a disgusting, yucky trans person. Like, if that's how you view things, you're ruining your own life. And that's true also for the people who do end up passing or can pass. Because like I've been in these, they're usually the sort of like Blanchard fans, HSTS group chats who are really horrible to everyone they encounter. So sometimes they're kind of fun because they're just like so predictable, but they put so much value in passing, not just like how do you look to the average stranger on the street, but like, are your hobbies correct? Are you styling your hair the correct way? Or is this like...
Yeah, did you use the right body wash?
Yeah, exactly. That, I mean, you encounter that stuff all the time. Like I was in one group and they were all like saying that one of them wasn't allowed to pick a certain subject to study at college or whatever because it was too AGP. And so they were like, going to change to do a different thing because they thought it wouldn't make them pass if they had like a degree in chemistry or something.
That's such internalized sexism.
It's definitely just straight up sexism, and it's insane. And when you put that much value in it, like it dominates your life. Like I've certainly been in situations where maybe I started passing and I was like, if I do these things, I'm more likely to. And then I started thinking about them all the time. And like when I was getting FFS and I did a load of research into what that changes about your face, I started seeing all these things in people's faces I didn't see before. It took me so long, like absolutely years, and only recently have I got rid of it, that when a woman, trans or cis, walks in a room, the first thing I used to see was their brow ridge and be like, oh, look at the brow ridge on her. Like, most people would clock her as trans. And it's just a fucking brain rot bullshit. And it's because, like, I was already in a place where I didn't really value passing. I was doing it just to reduce my own dysphoria, but I still had brain rot internalized this, like, almost like value system of brow ridges and orbital ridges and all this kind of rubbish. And if you aren't actively working to get rid of that, then it could dominate your life and it can start making you insecure about your own appearance or making you do things you wouldn't do otherwise. And if you're not transitioning for dysphoria reasons, then everything else you're doing in top is just like societal rubbish. And it ends up harming yourself, it harms other trans people. And it's like elitist. Like these groups, so I'm kind of rambling here, but these groups I was just saying about, these that we've probably all encountered on to some degree, these like people who value passing over everything else. They're like the Blair White
Mean Girls. I call them the mean girls. So you can't sit with us because you're not wearing the right color. Like like they really are. I've been trying. Like I have had those situations where it's like, funny, oh Josie, you pass. Come into the inner circle, the inner sanctum of like trans medicalism and hatred.
You can
I'm like,
sit at the table as long as you wear pink.
Yeah, exactly.
But like those,
awful.
It's an elitist thing, and part of the reason they do it is because they've internalized all this sexism and transphobia bullshit, and it controls their brains. But also because they're just like desperately insecure, and they need to create a hierarchy system. Like when someone says to me, "Trans people are disgusting," I'm like, "You're a piece of shit." Like, full stop. That I know you're a dickhead. But some people are like, oh, maybe trans people are disgusting, but I don't view myself as disgusting. So I know what I'll do. I'll agree with them that some trans people are disgusting, but I'm not like them. I'm actually of a different class. I'm one who passes, and actually I wear pink every day. And actually I don't have a major in chemistry because I decided to do like, some generically feminine thing. Just so, you need to think of me better now because I'm a better trans person. And like, sure, they contribute to toxic stereotypes and they're harming themselves, but also it's just pathetic. Like, backbone. Like, it's so. Oh no, actually, you're one of the bad trans people because you're ugly. It's like,
or just own that you're a basic. like you're just a basic plastic in the Mean Girls. Just be like you are that girl that everybody hated in high school, and just go. Yeah, if that's your vibe.
And
you don't have to make everybody else feel bad.
Grown-ass women will be doing it, like women in their 50s.
Yeah, I know, it's pretty cringe. But I think if you look like the Mean Girls vibe, but you're doing it in a way where you're not like desperately trying to create some kind of validation system for yourself in a hierarchy, and you're not trying to push it on other people's. If you're just like saying catty comments and wearing pink, like that is fine. I support you in that.
Yeah.
It's just when you're trying to make a hierarchy and when you're trying to like bully other people into not transitioning or something, then you can fuck off.
Yeah. So. Yeah, just be, go be your trad wife, go be the trophy wife, just go and do the thing, but just be you, and you don't have to tear down every other woman around you. Like, you just don't have to do that.
Is the trad wife like the wife of Chad, like the Chad from the memes?
No, like a traditional wife, like like the one that's, like trad.
If you can, If you can find
I try to avoid stuff.
It's okay. It's okay.
If you can find a man who values trad wives and also values trans women, fucking go for it, mate. Good luck, because there aren't many of them.
Good luck. No. Grab him and never let go.
Yeah, because you're. I mean, if you want that, it's just like the people you're appealing to already think you're worse than them. Like, you're never going to overcome that.
So why do you want to be like? I don't know. I feel like there's so much internalized sexism with trans women in particular.
It's pick me,
and with trans guys too.
And also with cis women, like it's like the conservative women who are like they want to be oppressed because they know that if they lean into it, they are number two. They're the second one on the ladder, and beneath them are, when it's like straight white women, beneath them are gay people and black people and trans people, and they get to be the second rung on the ladder, and they get to look down. And if they start trying to team up against the oppression, then suddenly they have to be with all of the riffraff, and they have to hang out with all the trans people and all the black people, and suddenly they have to admit to the fact this whole thing's garbage and they're being oppressed, and it's much worse, and it's much nicer to just say I'm one of the good ones, escape most of the oppression, look down your nose at people, think you're better than them, get some self-worth, and then hopefully escape. I don't know. It's just pathetic, really.
It is pathetic. But anyway, do what you like. That's what's important. Just be you and do what you like. If you like wearing makeup, do that. If you like wearing dresses, do that. If you like wearing jeans, do that. It doesn't matter. Like, just be you.
If you like competing in international Pokemon card championships, just do that. That's what I say.
Just you want to be a world-class physicist, do that.
But Yeah, no, I honestly, I love everything y'all said. I'm happy to hear that. I was a little worried I was going to get a pushback on it, but this show has been spot on when it comes to everything. Like
Good.
even when like the stuff going on in like GAZA, I don't want to say it to get y'all demonetized, but like when I saw that, when I saw y'all's positions on that stuff, and I saw y'all's positions on pretty much everything, I'm like, this show knows what's up. So I was like, I feel like they'll know what's up when it comes to passing. And like,
it's because
when you said hierarchy, I think that's the main thing I like wanted to call to talk to us about is like, I, for the longest time, kept myself in the closet because like I knew I was trans at a very early age, but I always kept it hidden until I was a lot older because I just had that in my head where I'm like, I can't be one of the good ones, so why even do it? And if anyone's listening right now, or if anyone watches this later on, like that hierarchy isn't real. That you don't need to look cis. You know, like everything that like you guys just said is so spot on. And if someone does listen to this and you feel like you can get rid of that hierarchy in your head. Like, be ungovernable when it comes to gender. Like,
yeah.
And I don't know, just my heart is warmed. I'm glad you guys gave the answers that you did.
Reason why
I did have a follow-up to it, kind of, that was like if you just don't pass, like, because like for me personally, I feel like, and like I know you were saying it's kind of a defeatist thing sometimes, but for me, genuinely, I feel like, you know, I'm very, very tall, you know, and I think that's part of the reason people usually don't say transphobic shit to me, because like they don't want to catch these hands. But like straight up, and I'm not a violent person. I'm like very, very gentle. I get my ass whooped in any fight, but like how you look, you know, like and like I'm not afraid to tell people fuck you. But
I will say this
if
about
you
the
don't
visibly
pass,
trans. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I'll say this. Most people in society don't really care that much. Most people in society, if you're like walking through the world, you have long hair and you're wearing feminine clothes, they don't even look at your face. Because everybody's even freaking worrying about their own self and their own person and their own bubble. Very rarely do people go around looking to see if the person that they're standing next to is a trans person or not, right? So it's only the most hateful people that are going around like looking like radar, like where's the trans person that I'm looking for? Most people don't even care. Doesn't matter if your voice is low, doesn't matter if you have stubble, doesn't even matter at all. Most people are like, yes, ma'am, whatever, blah, blah, and they'll just walk on through their day and not even realize that they even had an interaction with the trans person that is visibly trans or not. So in most cases, 95, 99% of the time, people aren't going to clock you because people are so consumed in their own self-egos and their own bubbles to even realize or give a crap. Right. So that's what I have to say. And I've noticed that with a lot of my, friends that are, I guess, quote unquote, visibly trans in their own mind. They tell me that all the time. It was just like one day they were walking through the world, and then the way that they just hold themselves, present themselves, the way they just like walk through the world, everybody genders them correctly and they say their names correctly, and no one ever says a thing about it, regardless of what society deems to be passable or not. So a lot of times it's in our own minds when we think that we don't pass, because a lot of times society will just say, yeah, you pass because you're giving it whatever effort or want that you want to try to do. But like most people don't care. Right. That's how I tend to understand it. But anyways, I didn't mean to cut you off on your question.
Oh no, that was kind of just more of a secondary part to it. And I did have a question related to passing. That's more, but I also don't want to hog the line. Here's the question though. If you want to answer it now, that's cool. If you want to wait. Oh, and I'm sorry, Katie. Did you have another thing to say? I didn't mean to just storm over.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment on when you said about defeatist. Maybe I didn't quite communicate it well. At the time, I felt that was a defeatist attitude. I don't now. I think that a good way to look at it is to be like, it doesn't matter if I'll pass. But at the time, I was like, I feel like I want to, because I that's where I want to be, but I'll see what it's like, and I don't think I ever will. And yeah, I don't want to say that it's always defeatist to think that, because if you think you won't ever and you don't want to, or you think you won't ever but you would like to because it might make your life easier, but that's fine and you don't really care, you're not a defeatist. That's just being realistic. So anyway, sorry, go ahead. We'll probably take this call next, this question in another call, but you're welcome to hint at it for future viewers.
Okay, and I'm cool with just asking it straight up, and it can be for later, because
yeah,
I do want to call the show again. It's just that it's since you guys aren't on England time, I usually am never home when it's on. But
yeah,
the question is, how do you navigate the other forms of passing? Mainly, because I live in a very multicultural area. And a lot of my friends will talk about white passing a lot, and I know that doesn't necessarily apply in majority white places, like in America, certain parts of America, or in England. Well, I don't know England nowadays. I've heard London's very multicultural, but
yeah.
And then also with adult passing, because I don't know, freaking. I've talked about this with a lot of trans guys, not many other trans femme people, but I have talked about it with some trans femme people, but just how going through HRT makes you look a lot younger, and how to navigate people thinking you're a lot younger than you are and getting disrespected, and, just how overall our societies don't really respect young people, and that's kind of a problem in and of itself. So, yeah, you can see how these are their own whole conversations.
Yeah, but I think they do have similarities in that. The whole concept of passing is kind of made up of a few different things, and one of them is society has a load of rules, and if you fit into the predefined rules, your life is easier. If you don't try and break the rules, if you don't try and have a gay relationship, if you don't stand out as trans, if you then your life will be easier. And some people are in situations where they necessarily break the rules just by waking up and existing every day. Like if you're in a gay relationship, if you're someone who's visibly trans, a whole host of other things. And in any context of that, passing in anything, in any situation, if you break the rules to how someone looking at you perceives it, then you might have a more difficult life. But another aspect to passing is wanting to be read how you're trying to present yourself. I saw this good TED talk about how gender is just a language, and it explains how a lot of particularly trans people, I guess both trans men and trans women, often early in their transition pick these really hyper polarized gender things to do. Like trans women really like dresses and makeup, and trans men really like working out at the gym and growing a beard and stuff. And but then as they go on in their transition, they kind of care about it less, and then they get to the point where it's not really a big deal. And when you look back, certainly there was this good saying, someone said hell for trans women is just the real world, but where you're only allowed to wear clothes from the first 6 months of your transition. I think that's very true, because it's fucking, they're diabolical, and I hope I never have to wear anything again. But the reason, part of the reason is you're finding yourself. Part of the reason is you're trying to find yourself, but part of the reason is early in your transition, when you don't just not pass as a cis women, you don't really pass as how you're trying to present yourself. Sometimes one of the most depressing things early on in my transition was when someone just read me as a cis man rather than as a trans woman. I'm like, I'm not expecting for you to, think I'm not trans and to just think I'm a cis woman. But seriously, you just think I'm just a random man? That was the most depressing.
Yeah, no, for real. It's are you an idiot? Do you not know trans women exist?
Yeah, but some people don't, and sometimes it's not their fault. And the thing is, so when you have all these hyper polarized gender things that you can do. You wear pink, you have over the top makeup, you have really styled hair, you know, wear a dress and all these kinds of things. All of these are tools to communicate to someone. And you know, you can have this argument about whether it's reinforcing stereotypes and blah 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 blah, but on an individual level, people are just trying to exist in society. And sure, you don't want to be beaten up on the street because a transphobe has clocked you as trans, but also communicating your identity is important to people, not just for trans people, for everyone. Everyone wants to be seen for who they are, to some degree. And it's like why people tell their life stories to people and stuff, and it's why people describe themselves and care about all this kind of stuff. And early on in transition, when someone reads you as something and they don't read you as the thing you're trying to communicate, it's frustrating and distressing. And it's the same with these other things. Like, I'm sure if you see yourself in a certain racial group and people keep reading you in a different one, it's frustrating and distressing. If you're like 21 years old man and everyone thinks you're like a 16-year-old boy, I'm sure it's very stressful and distressing. Like, that must be infuriating. And it's not like some kind of passing as an adult. I mean, you could view it as that, but really they're just saying people keep reading me as a thing that I'm not, and I'm trying to communicate it to them. And you might see people in these situations where they're like, I know quite a few guys who have a beard, and if you say to them, why do you have a beard? They'll be like, oh, because I have a baby face and everyone thinks I'm 16 if I don't. Like, I know like 10 guys who will say that. And that's like a form of signaling to other people who they are in the same way that like gender can be used as language to do a similar thing. I'm going off and I shouldn't, because I probably need to stop now. But Josie, do you have anything to say on that before we let Katy go? Katy spelt wrong go?
Yeah, I think that the idea of passing in other aspects, such as white passing, like especially as a Latina woman, a woman of color, it's a very big topic, right? Like, I know when somebody says, "Oh, you're so articulate," I know exactly what they're saying, right? When they say that, they're saying that, oh. Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm a brown person that can speak like a white person. How articulate of you, right? Like, you know, it's one of those things that is very real, especially in my lived experience. And I used to be a reactor operator in the Navy, which was like 95% white. So there was a state of being that I had to be just to be able to function in the group that I was in, including having to pass the cis man. Right. And so there's a lot of things that exist inside of that question. And there's so much nuance, and I could go on it all day. But I think that this is a really great conversation. And I think Katy was spot on with the whole idea of like passing is a language of trying to be seen as something. And when that mistranslation happens, that's when the distress happens, right? Like when you pick up the phone and you're just like, you're not gendered correctly, or when you are perceived as somebody 20 years younger than you actually are, or older, right? Like, you know, those are all distresses that society gives us because it's a mistranslation. But no, I think it's a very good nuanced conversation, and I appreciate Katy for asking that.
Oh yeah, no, and I appreciate y'all answering. And sorry, I got smoker voice. I don't actually smoke, fine. I promise. But no, I used to, and then when I started estrogen, they were like, "You will die," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, that's true. But you will die.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you get worse results in transition if you smoke. So if you smoke and you're just starting transition, you should just stop for your own. Even if you don't care about dying, you should do it.
I didn't even know that. They didn't even mention it. They were just like, you will get blood clots and you will die.
Well, that's because they try to
no, thank you guys for the answers.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, thanks, Katy. We're going to let you go. Yes. Please call in with a part 3 in the future. It's been a good discussion. Bye.
Bye.
So it looks like we have ended the lines early. There were a few more callers. I would love to take more, but it's like coming up to midnight here, so I'm just going to have to say we're not doing any more calls today.
Are you sticking around, Katie,
Josie's
for
fault.
supers, or do you need to go?
If we have
I
a
can do
million
it.
super chats, I won't do them all, but maybe I can do if there's a few.
We've only got one
stick
page
around.
so far, so it's not too bad.
Okay, we'll slam through them. Send a super
all right,
chat
let's
now
go
and keep
through
me
it.
up all night. Let's do it.
Let's
Josie,
do it.
go for it. You can
All
go
right. 5. My gosh, it's been so long since I've done the show. That's euros, right? Or is that
Euros.
pounds?
It's only
Okay,
like
no, that's
the
pounds.
third most widely used currency in the world. Come on.
Is that something other than
So
an American dollar?
to not even know the euro symbol.
I said euros first in my defense. Okay. Okay, so this is how it's going to be. I get it. I deserve that. 5 euros from Jonathan Brockett. Money for the trans agenda. Thank you, and much needed.
5 somethings from Thomas Donald Jacob. For the Belgian residents, the National Transgender Non-Binary Survey is happening at TGNBS Study. It helps policy stuff. Please fill it out. Yes, Belgians, check that out. I didn't know anything about it. If Thomas or another Belgian reminds me, I'll post about it tomorrow on Twitter and get people to do stuff.
That's exciting.
Great.
$10 from my friend Alyssa Ljub.
You need that one.
I know, I did know that one. That was an easy one. Most of the cost of a California name and or gender change and traffic infractions is a court fee, and that's how a $25 traffic fine goes up to approximately $400 fee. Waivers are available for people who get government aid. Yeah, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. California is really expensive to file anything.
To do anything, to live.
It is, that's true.
Expensive, yeah. £5 sterling GBP from Velocity 11. I think Owen Jones put it best when he said that transphobes are going to be disappointed that trans people will continue to exist. True. We've had so many "this is it for trans rights," and we all seem to be here, and we all seem to still have at least some rights. So get wrecked.
Still going strong. £5. I'm sorry, 5 euros. Sorry. 5 euros. This is going to be a running thing. I think it's going to be a running thing. And now I'm going to go to bed the night studying all of the currency symbols. 5 euros from Jonathan Brockett. Unlike sports, in politics, we're winning 95% of the time. That's true. That's true. Trans can't sport.
But we can politic, apparently.
Yes,
$4.99 from Louise Richardson. It is true, though, that on hospital forms you can actually choose your race or all that apply. I've not tested it, but they always ask. Exactly. Everything. All of this stuff is self-ID. When you fill in any form, they'll say, what is your name? What is your sex? What is your race? What is your... you're literally self-IDing every single one. The only time when it's not self-ID is when it's fill in what it says in your passport. It is a crime to enter the wrong information. Then it isn't self-ID. Then you have to report what your legal documents say, and that rarely happens. It does happen when you're immigrating into a country or whatever. Don't self-ID. Right? What's on your passport?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Good point. $10 from Domestic. Damned, I missed the transatlantic again. Thank you for doing this for us. Oh, good thing it's recorded. You can see it when in a moment.
You can watch it back, and also good thing we're on next week, because then you can be here next week, sending us abuse in live chat. That would be amazing.
And I believe you can be here next week.
Sorry.
So. Yeah, I think I'm going to be here next week.
Oh wow, I didn't realize my mic was live. I'm typing away. Somebody should have yelled at me. I'm so sorry.
It's Arjun and Josie.
It's me and Josie. Yeah.
Yay!
Very exciting. Oh.
Did we skip? Did we skip Allison?
Yeah, go back one.
Yeah, we did that one too.
We haven't read this one out.
No, that one's the new one.
$5 from Alyssa. The new genders, high quality precision engineered and flat packed with assembly required. GC won't be super critical long. The scram switch is coming. I don't fully understand all of that comment.
So Alyssa is my other nuclear engineer, trans woman in the space here.
I did.
Yeah, so SCRAM is Supercritical Reactor Axeman is what it actually stands for, which is funny. But it's the turn off the reactor in an emergency situation. That's what it means. But yes. So shut them down.
Emergency eject
SCRAM
button. Okay. This one's you.
$5 from Scott. As a cishet ally, it's important to me to gain some perspectives of life for someone trans. So thank you for having this show for me to learn from. Well, you're welcome and happy to do it.
And thanks for watching. To all the Scott Smiths out there, this show's for you. Unless you're trans. Well, then I guess it's for you too. £5 from Bob Jones. Not arguing, by the way. Can't remember what you might be arguing about, but cool. Good stuff. Argue away. It's good to argue.
Thanks, Bob.
Well, I was gonna.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna. Bob Jones was in chat, saying he didn't agree with everything that we say.
Well,
or something to that effect.
You should call in then. You should call in and argue.
Yeah, I told him. I told him 3 times.
Arguing is. I'm obsessed with arguing. I was gonna say the reason why. With our last caller, with Katie, when she was saying this show's so good, the reason is because this show is on a skeptics channel where people have approached life in a skeptical way, where we're like, okay, let's look at all the evidence, let's make some logical arguments, let's change our minds when we encounter something which shows that we are wrong, and that is why we end up in all the best positions, because
that's right.
That is the way to be. That's why you should subscribe to the channel and join our Patreon.
True. Definitely do that. You get free. Bob, if you subscribe to Patreon, if you get it to Patreon, then there's a new show that you can get involved with now. So you got to do it. You got to do it. $4.99 from Gayest Husky. Republicans believe that a kid can't consent to life-saving healthcare, but they think kids can consent for forced pregnancies. Vote them out. I could not agree more.
Sick.
Yeah.
The regret rate for being forced to give birth as a child has got to be over 50%, no doubt.
Yeah. The tragedy that is. Yeah. Ugh.
Sick people.
It really is.
And they're also the people who want child marriage to stay legal. £10 from Bob Jones. Bob, this better be an argument. I better read an argument here. Let's see. Interesting show. I enjoyed it. Okay.
All right.
I may well phone in next time. Do it. I'm not the enemy, by the way. I'm here to learn. I'm always suspicious of people who have to keep telling you they're not the enemy, to be honest. Just pick a position and stick to it and be prepared to either change my mind or admit you're wrong and change your mind. You don't, we're not enemies unless you're campaigning to wipe me out or something. Anyway, I'll finish the rest. In my opinion, it's okay to disagree, and if it is explained to me why I'm wrong, I will change my mind. Well, there you go. That's good.
All right, Bob.
I think disagreeing as an action is an essential part of the discussion, obviously. But agreeing to disagree, it's okay if we disagree. It's a fucking coward's position. If we disagree on something, at least one of us is wrong. Possibly both of us. And we can fucking resolve it. Can't we? So, if we disagree about what the best day of the week is, then who gives a fuck? We can do a little fun argument about that. But if we disagree about whether trans people should be allowed to be voted into office, then probably your position is fucking garbage and I'll be able to tear it apart. Yeah. So call in and let's have a go.
Bob, I cannot wait to hear from you next week.
I think Bob's position was essentially that he's against self-ID or something like that, and wasn't really responding to responses in chat. So yeah, you should call in, Bob.
What you can do is there are 30 countries now with self-ID. What you could do is you could go and get all the evidence from all of those countries which backs up your point, and then you can call in and talk to Aron and Josie next week and be like, Here is all of the evidence. I'm sure that your call will be very long and full of evidence, and Josie and Arden will be crushed. So please do bring all of that evidence that definitely exists for your position. Thanks, Bob. This one's you, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, $20
Do you know this one?
Canadian. From Kathleen, just here to throw around some of my sweet Canadian cash money from Big Gender, even more evil than Big Pharma. Yes, because we work together. I'm kidding, everybody. It's not true. We are just bad.
£5 from Helen Lawson. Have some worthless post-Brexit money just to keep lightweight Katie awake a bit longer. Thanks, Helen. Thanks for your pittance. The pound is still worth more than the dollar, so that's like $5.50 or something.
For a little bit longer until all the turfs tank it. $5 from Defines Trans. New to the show, I've been binging it all week to the detriment of everything else. Thank you, and Arden too, for representing and educating. You're welcome.
I wonder if their name is actually a pun on defenestration. Maybe it's defenestrans.
Do you
know the word defenestration?
Defenestration is one of my favorite English words. Of course I know defenestration. Yes.
Well, viewers at home, you might not know. I've actually been to the place where it come from.
Really? Because obviously it's an English word. That makes sense. It's to throw somebody out a window. You need a word for that. It happens all the time in England, apparently.
Yeah, and well, it's actually from Czech Republic or Czechia. There's the Prague Castle. Yeah, they had I can't remember who it was, a king or a bishop or someone that they didn't like. And like when we had our little revolution in the UK, we like had a trial and cut one person's head off. And in France, they just like butchered the entire royal family. And in Czech Republic, they just chucked someone out of a window. And then they like did it again 100 years later or something, and then it became like a meme. So now they chuck people out of windows. I don't know. There's something like that.
I love the word even more.
I'm sorry to all the Czech people watching, but that's vaguely it. Next, £5 from Bob Jones.
Yes. Sorry. Is it me or is it you? Oh, it's you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I am not against self-ID. I am a cognitive scientist. I am against only a small aspect of care due to the evidence. Oh, it's interesting.
Now
I'm calling with your new interview then.
Yes, please. I'm very interested. Bob, I can't wait to hear from you.
I'm resisting the urge to respond. I'm not a host today. Slap my wrist.
Slap it.
Arden is banned from Rational Arguments on Thursdays. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to go to bed. Josie, it was good to see you again for the first time in a while.
I know.
And
I miss you.
I'm sorry that you have to deal with Stinky Arden next week.
I know.
And
I'll live.
I will look up the defenestration fact in full next time, and we'll see you all again. Josie, do you have a closing thought while the credits come up?
Go and read the U.S. Trans Survey. Go do that. The first report is out.
Fill in the Belgian one if you're Belgian.
Yes, if you're Belgian, do the Belgian one. It's good stuff.
And if you're not Belgian or US,